and it often feels like rarely a day goes by without Luggy Lineker tweeting his way into trouble. Well, fed up of his interventions on the Israel conflict, journalist Nicole Lambert confronted the BBC pundit. She told him he was acting like an anti-Semite and asked why he hadn't mentioned the hostages being held by Hamas.
Nicole joins us now. Hi, Nicole. Long time since we spoke. Thank you for coming on board. Now, this was at a Broadcasting Press Guild event in Soho. I've been to a few myself, where he addressed, people like yourselves who write about media, write about television. And at the end of his sort of soliloquy or his interaction with the audience, you didn't applaud. And he sought you out. Say, what's up with you? Tell us what happened then.
So we'd had a kind of confrontation earlier during the event where I'd asked him about breaking BBC guidelines about what he'd tweeted about Israel, and then I didn't applaud. And then he came up and said, "Is everything okay?" And I have to kind of say I was quite surprised that he came to talk to me, and I kind of, when you've got a million things going through your head and you don't really know where to start. So it was a bit like that. But I said, you're the way you're tweeting, you're acting like an anti-Semite. You're not mentioning the hostages. You haven't mentioned the women being raped. And then it became a big backwards and forwards about some of, I suppose, the big questions that people are talking about online about Israel and Palestine, and he kind of came out with just lots of stuff that I get from lots of trolls who see it in very simplistic terms.
So Nicole, when you said to him, you're acting like an anti-Semite, I think you effectively said, look, you tweet about Palestine, you tweet about the fate of the people in Gaza, but you never tweet about Israel. You never tweet about the hostages. What did he say to that?
Well, to that I said that at first, and then he kind of moved on, because I said, what about the rapes of the women? And he said, what about the dead babies? I just want peace. So I said, we all want peace. And when I asked him about the hostages, he said, well, what should I say? And, then he said he was worried about getting trolled and all the toxic media. And I said, well, I'm getting trolled all the time. I'm getting called a Nazi. And he said, you're not a Nazi. I said, I know I'm not a Nazi.
That much you know. I mean, he's symptomatic of left-wing people who believe that this is my theory anyway, who believe that, sticking up for Palestine and sticking it to Israel is a decent thing to do. That's the decent thing to do. I mean, what is his attitude to the fact that Israel was invaded by Hamas and they killed 1,300 people, and that Israel is involved in some kind of righteous cause here? Why can he not see that, do you think?
Well, I think this is the problem, and I think if you see it in really simplistic terms. So I did say, I said they invaded, and you didn't mention anything on October the 7th, and he said, I wasn't online on October 7th. I said, yes, you were. You were tweeting about Tottenham. And then he made it all about him. He said, I went on October the 8th and I was trending. So he made it all about the kind of toxicity of Twitter. And we all know about that. But that's no excuse to not even mention the atrocities of Hamas. And of course, he then wants to say, well, there are reasons why. But, I'm trying to explain to him that it's much more complex than the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is complex in itself. But you've got Iran being involved. You've got the whole reason why Hamas did it at that point. You have the fact that Israel was divided. And there's this kind of no understanding about why Israel would retaliate. And of course, the death of civilians is horrendous. We're all against that. But I tried to explain to him that no sovereign nation would not do what Israel is doing. And I gave him the figures, because the equivalent figures are like 6,000 Brits being killed, 6,000 English people being killed, 1,000 of us being held hostage. Do we think that our government would sit on their hands and do nothing?
Exactly. And also, I think you had a contra Tom about the IRA. He said, well, when the IRA was bombing Britain, we didn't invade Dublin. And you made the very salient point, well, the IRA wasn't running Ireland, whereas Hamas arguably are. Well, they are running Gaza, aren't they? So it's not really a situation of equivalence there, is it?
I mean, none of it is. And I think this is one of the problems, that it's a 75-year-old story, and in some ways it's a 3,000-year-old story. And a lot of people try and create these equivalents. And obviously, being British, then you would try and make that equivalent, because, you know, we all remember growing up at a time when there were bombs and it did seem like an intractable situation, you know, and thankfully there is a kind of form of peace now. But this is very different. Hamas have said from the off, we want to kill all the Jews. We do not accept Israel. And they have shown that over the years. There was an unsteady peace in that, there would be a few years where they weren't throwing rockets over Israel. And then October 7 happened, and that showed that you can't make peace with these people. So even though the IRA, however heinous they were and their crimes, they never said that they wanted to wipe every single Protestant out or every single English person out. And that is the difference.
Yeah. Now, just before you go, I mean, you must have heard this sort of... I don't think Gary Lineker or his ilk are necessarily bad people. I don't think Gary Lineker's necessarily a bad guy. It's just that he's a left-winger and they have a thing. Israel's the bad guy. Palestine's the good guy. That must really tire you out, having to confront that attitude day after day.
It's just really simplistic, and it's a shame that it was good that, look, it was really good that he came to talk to me.
I agree with that.
So maybe he wanted to learn something, and maybe he realised that he is seeing things too simplistically. And I tried to explain to him the absolute pain that the Jewish community in Britain is feeling, and that someone with his kind of reach, 9 million followers on Twitter and all of that, and his power, you know, the best paid person on the BBC, when he's doing things so one-sided.
You're right, you're right, absolutely right, Nicole. We've got to go. It's the end of the show. Great to talk to you again, and thank you for coming on.